I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel is livid over the U.S. extension of the Iran nuclear deal. The Prime Minister is announcing new economic incentives for the Palestinians, and an Israeli artist is using body paint to show off the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. As U.S. President Donald Trump prepares for his visit to Israel next week, he's being caught in a political tsunami at home over allegations that he compromised an Israeli intelligence asset. Israel's Channel 1 News is reporting that the intelligence Trump disclosed to Russia involving a plot to detonate laptop bombs came directly from the Islamic State capital of Raqqa. And allegedly, the U.S. got this intel from the IDF's military intelligence. According to ABC News, Trump's loose lips may be endangering the life of the spy who got this intel. The Justice Department has appointed a special counsel to oversee an investigation into Trump's Russia ties, and Israel's ambassador to the U.S. as well as top intelligence officials are meeting with the U.S. They're hoping to resolve this crisis before Trump's visit. According to an Israeli official, Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were not discussing the situation during their unscheduled 20-minute phone call on Tuesday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to unveil an assortment of economic incentives for the Palestinians, all in the latest bid to reach a peace deal. According to Israel's Channel 2 News, Netanyahu will announce the details of the Palestinian stimulus package on Sunday, just a day before President Donald Trump arrives in Israel. In a related story, Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon was meeting with his Palestinian Authority counterpart in Jerusalem yesterday. Kahlon and Shukri Bishara discussed the potential opening of the Allenby Bridge crossing between Jordan and the West Bank for 24 hours a day, and other measures. Bishara is concerned with the high unemployment among qualified Palestinian graduates. These moves come ahead of Trump's push for new peace talks. Trump's peace envoy Jason Greenblatt is meeting with Israeli and Palestinian officials today to finalize details of the president's visit. And according to a report in the Wall Street Journal, the Gulf Arab states are willing to essentially normalize relations with Israel in exchange for a partial settlement freeze and an easing of the Gaza blockade. Israel and the United States are fresh out of a diplomatic spat regarding the Western Wall and its connection to the Jewish state. Joining me today in the studio to discuss the issue is Dr. Mordechai Kedel, who served for 25 years in the IDF military intelligence and is an expert in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure, Natasha.
All right, so let's begin with this recent scuffle over the status of the Western Wall. Is this abnormal? Have previous U.S. administrations challenged Jewish sovereignty over the capital?
Well, it's not the Western Wall the problem. It's the whole Temple Mount and actually the whole Jerusalem, which was occupied by Jordan illegally, immorally, and the world doesn't know about this. Let me just tell you something. In Arabic, they say a liar should have good memory. This booklet was published in Jordan, by Jordan. It's official guide to the West Bank and Jordan, Jerusalem. This guide has a map inside, which shows Jerusalem. It was published in 1963, 4 years before Israel liberated Jerusalem from the Jordanian occupation. Here they relate to the Temple Mount as Mount Moriah, to that extent, Mount Moriah. This is even forward, this is for 1961, another official Jordanian map, which is inside this booklet, again talks about Temple Mount as Mount Moriah. Okay?
Now tell our viewers what that means.
And now they deny the whole thing and the whole connection between Judaism and Jerusalem.
Can you tell our viewers what that means, Mount Moriah, for those of
Mount Moriah is the biblical name of the mountain, which actually they admit that this is the place of the temple, because the temple was established on the Mount Moriah, according to the Bible, according to Jewish sources and everything. So before Israel liberated Jerusalem, they had no problem to admit that the Temple Mount is a Jewish place by calling it Mount Moriah. Not only this, even the Grand Mufti who was a big Jew hater, who took part in the extermination of the Jews of Hungary in 1944, he published in 1930 this booklet, a guide, this is an original, a brief guide to Al-Haram and Sharif Jerusalem. He published it in 1930. In this booklet, he says clearly and explicitly about the Temple Mount. Its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. This too is the spot, according to the universal belief, universal means including Islam, on which, and he quotes a verse from the Melachim, from Kings, David built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. The Mufti already admits. Today they deny any connection between Judaism and the Mount. Why? They view the Israeli, as they call it, occupation of Jerusalem as some kind of returning of Judaism to life after Islam came to the world to cancel Judaism altogether. According to
no, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you one question, so hopefully you can give us an answer in 1 or 2 sentences. How do you think this dispute is going to have an impact on the upcoming visit of President Donald Trump to Israel?
First of all, I'm highly afraid that the Trump administration are not aware of history, of the legal rights of the Jews of Jerusalem, and of the real issues, what happened here. And if there are people in that administration who still think that the West Bank is not, or Jerusalem is not part of Israel, something is wrong in this administration.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Kedar. Jonathan Pollard is once again trying to lift the restrictive probation conditions he's been living with since his 2015 release from prison after having been convicted of spying for Israel. The now 62-year-old told a New York appeals court that he poses no flight risk. Pollard asked for his electronic tracking device to be removed and to no longer have to submit his computer for monitoring. He also wants permission to move to Israel, where his wife Esther lives. As part of the parole conditions, Pollard isn't allowed to leave the U.S. until 2020. The former naval intelligence officer pleaded guilty in 1986 to conspiracy to commit espionage for having provided Israeli contacts with hundreds of classified documents. He was sentenced to a life term and released after serving 30 years. Pollard's attorney told the court that his client cannot disclose any more secrets because he's simply unable to remember 3 decades old information, which would in any case be rendered obsolete by now. While the peace process with the Palestinians is likely to take center stage during U.S. President Donald Trump's impending visit to Israel, dangers Iran poses to the Jewish state are also likely to be a key topic. And particularly now that Washington's just basically extended the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran that was strenuously opposed by Jerusalem. Donald Trump, the candidate, vowed to tear up the deal with Iran, but Donald Trump, the president, is taking a different approach. His administration has just signed the latest periodic waiver to keep punitive measures from being reimposed on the hardline Islamic Republic. That essentially means the White House has just preserved the nuclear deal for now. Trump still says he needs more time to study the accord and that Washington will never allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. Iranian officials have repeatedly threatened to wipe Israel off of the map. Meanwhile, the White House is setting its sights on the Shiite regime's ballistic missile program it fears could be used against America's key allies like Israel or Saudi Arabia. New measures are now being taken against certain military officials and a company in Iran, as well as a China-based network accused of providing the supplies needed for the rocket development. This is all consistent with what we've seen from the White House so far. Its assessment to Congress last month that the Ayatollahs are complying with terms of the 2015 accord kept the economic benefits flowing. But at the same time, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was publicly slamming the deal for possibly not doing enough to stop the rogue state from developing nuclear weapons. An Israeli civilian today shot dead a Palestinian man and injured a photojournalist after he reportedly came under attack in the northern West Bank. Officials say the incident occurred near the Palestinian city of Hawara. A settler is believed to have opened fire at a group of Palestinians lined up along a nearby highway as they were pelting cars with rocks. The Israeli army is still investigating the circumstances of what happened. But a spokesperson for the Binyamin Regional Council says this is the third consecutive day there have been riots on the same road and that terrorists have been endangering Israeli family vehicles filled with children. The killed Palestinian has been identified as 23-year-old Muataz Hussein Tayeh from a town outside of Nablus. Arab sources say the injured photographer is Majdi Ashtieh, who works with the Associated Press. He's believed to have been treated at a local hospital for a late shrapnel wound to his hand. Now, it might be hard to believe what the Egyptian president has just said about Donald Trump, and his comments come just when the badgered U.S. president could sure use some kind words. In a detailed interview with an Egyptian newspaper, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is calling Trump a unique and very great person. Not only that, apparently Trump is a decisive figure in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Sisi says that the Palestinians and the Arabs are ready for peace and that Israel sees this opportunity. He sees Trump's push for peace as a chance to live together in a better future away from hatred. Those are some strong words from a military strongman. Egypt is perhaps closer to Israel than any other Arab country with open relations and close security cooperation. But that hasn't always been the case. In the early 2010s, former President Mohamed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood steered Egypt into a pro-Hamas direction, threatening the historic Israeli-Egypt peace treaty. Now relations have been even better, with Israel even relying on Sisi to arrange a ceasefire in the 2014 Protective Edge war against Hamas. This week, several Gulf Arab states announced they're reportedly considering normalizing relations with Israel, all in exchange for a partial settlement freeze. Yet there are still many advocating for Palestinian sovereignty over all of the West Bank, and many of those people happen to come from NGOs funded by European entities. Is Europe the last holdout on stances the Arab nations are ready to disown? We're here with Olga Deutsch from NGO Monitor, an organization that monitors NGO activities in Israel and the territories. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Natasha. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's begin with some recent news. The Danish government just announced $8 million in grants to pro-BDS Palestinian NGOs. Is this a substantial number compared to the covert funding that we don't necessarily know about?
That is correct. The Danish foreign minister actually just finished his visit in the region. Yesterday he met with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, and this morning he spent the whole day in Ramallah with his delegation. And this morning they signed an agreement with Ramallah, with the Palestinian Authority, for an amount of $80 million by and large. But a part of that, which is the $8.3 million that you were referring to, will go to a handful of Palestinian human rights NGOs.
Now, what are those NGOs? Can you tell us who is going to be given that funding and what kind of work that they're doing on the ground?
Most certainly. It's very alarming, actually, to which NGOs the money went in the previous funding cycle, which, by the way, the money went up. In the previous cycle, Denmark allocated $5.7 million for the same period of time. So it's a significant number. It's a significant increase. Not only that, but also they announced in a document by the Foreign Ministry of Denmark that the number of recipients, meaning number of NGOs that will be receiving funding, will go down. So by NGO, it will be a larger allocation. And we're talking about really dangerous NGOs. Some of them incite to violence, justify terrorism, call for violence, call terrorists shahidim, or martyrs, promote blatant anti-Semitism. You can see a lot of this stuff on our website. You can see tweets of one of the activists, Manal Tamimi, who works for WikiLeaks, who enjoys this funding by IHL Secretariat, which Denmark just pledged to continue funding, where she calls for to murder all Zionists, all Israelis, etc. Like the worst possible things you can imagine. That hardly contributes to peace in the region.
Well, let's turn to another issue. The Prime Minister recently canceled a meeting with the German Foreign Minister following the Foreign Minister's meeting with Breaking the Silence, which is a highly contested organization here in Israel. That sent a strong message. Do you think that Europe is listening?
Well, it's a difficult question because it provokes an internal political debate here, but equally so a political internal debate in Europe. Breaking the Silence and B'Tselem became sort of symbols of what is seen as the civil society critical of the government in Israel. And I believe there could have been more constructive ways on both ends, both on the part of the German foreign minister and on part of our government to solve that issue. But most certainly the message that was conveyed was strong. I am not sure that what sort of came as a response from Europe is the response that we would like. What we sort of at NGO Monitor try to promote at both ends, both here in Israel and with the decision makers in Europe, is to call for a direct dialogue between the governments. These issues are obviously controversial, both there and here, but all the more reason for the decision makers, for members of the parliament to grab them hands-on and discuss on these tough issues and try to find at least the issues on which we can agree on and then move forward from there.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The mentally disturbed Israeli-American teenager who called in thousands of bomb threats around the world is having a hard time in prison. The 18-year-old who threatened Jewish institutions, schools, and hospitals has reportedly attempted suicide at least 5 times in the last 2 weeks. His parents say his autism and brain tumor prevent him from understanding the consequences of his actions and are worried that he has lost 30% of his body weight since his incarceration. His lawyer claims that he does not know how to differentiate between what is permitted and what is forbidden, but the hacker had a Bitcoin account that had received large deposits from overseas and a sophisticated setup to mask his identity. The attorney is appealing for crowd-funded donations to pay for his expensive medical treatments. Israeli Culture Minister Miri Regev stole the show at the opening of the Cannes Film Festival by appearing on the red carpet in a stunning gown featuring a panorama of Jerusalem. Regev debuted the dress while attending the opening film Ismail's Ghost at the annual festival in the French Riviera. Paparazzi and onlookers snapped photos of the golden white fabric featuring Israel's cultural diversity. The Western Wall, Tower of David, and Dome of the Rock Mosque could all be seen against a backdrop of the city's modern skyline. The Israeli diplomat says she commissioned the dress as a fashion statement to showcase the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem's liberation and reunification. She expressed happiness at being able to celebrate this historic date through art and fashion, while also honoring the beautiful status of Israel's eternal capital. The gown was created by Israeli designer Aviad Helman and his mother over the past several months. While it definitely turned heads, not all critics with the fashion police were pleased. The Times of Israel reviewer called Regev's selection a kitschy political statement that was also gaudy. As most art lovers know, artists can use almost any canvas to exhibit their works. And for one Israeli, that's the human body. Aviram is a skilled airbrush artist whose latest project involves what's known as camouflage painting. He's photographed many of Israel's most famous historical landmarks as they've never before been seen, with specially painted models blended into the foreground. Ram first forms a mental picture of how best to make his chosen site come alive by highlighting the natural beauty of the place. The 31-year-old then creates a free-hand airbrushed image, which he paints onto his models. Outdoor camouflage work is far more challenging than the indoor kind because of constantly changing shadows and colors caused by the shifting sun or even a cloud. Ram's airbrush art also appears on other mediums like portraits or wall murals. The Israeli has won first place in a number of body painting and reality TV show competitions in the United States. And even though he now lives in Florida, he says that for him, Israel will forever be home and always in his heart. When you have a business, you want to be able to trust all of your employees, but it's always important to have a way to check that they're actually on top of the ball. Joining us now is Roy Shiker, the senior product manager of the Israeli startup Elkran that offers unique monitoring software. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so what exactly does your company do?
Well, I represent Consist. So Consist is a multi-corporate, international corporate that works worldwide. But in Israel, we provide IT solutions and services. For example, Ekron. We are the official representative of Ekron at Israel and also in the United States. Therefore, I'm going straight forward to Ekron. Ekron is user activity monitoring. What it does, it's like a big brother for organizations. Medium, small enterprises, that doesn't matter because they all have the same problem, which is people.
People are a problem. Interesting.
No, they're
so
not a problem.
So how can people be a problem? Tell us about that.
They can be part of the solution, and I will explain why. Ekran, what it does actually, it records what user activity of any activity actually done by users, third-party vendors, and of course, high-risk users, power users, let's say. If you can take it, for example, I will take you straight to the world because it will be a lot easier. If we take, for example, any organization manage between 10, 20, 30 vendors that logs in every day to the organization and work on sensitive data. It could be something as worker details, or could be financial details that can be used in order to or steal the information and sell it, or harm this information. What Ekran does is simple. We just record. We gather all this information about what the user is doing in
So
details.
the idea is for people to know that they're being recorded at all times, so they're much less likely to commit any type of crime.
Of course.
Right, interesting. So what is unique about this technology? Is there anything else that exists on the market like this?
Yeah, well, there are similar products, but we are going like an innovative work of mine, because we are putting the point on IT vendors, because insider threats, people that work in the organization, you know them, you walk by them side by side every day, and you can record them and see exactly what they are doing. But IT vendors, let's say we have a dispute with IT vendor that just log into my organization, okay? And I want to know what he does because something wrong happened to me. All I need to do is go to Ekran and see exactly what happened. Okay? And it's not a matter of question if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. And it's going to happen to each organization. No matter what, if it's IT vendor, no matter what, if it's a privileged user or high-risk user, anyone can gain access to this sensitive data, but the main point here is Ekran is here to reflect what is really happening.
Is this technology available all over the world yet?
It's all over the world. In Israel, we are the biggest reseller in the world because Israel is the capital of cyber. Let me give you an example, like a small example. In a big financial organization last year, it was published not a long time ago. A big financial organization, an IT system administrator copied sensitive information to a USB device and tried to sell it back to the employer. And he tried to blackmail them, actually, and they caught him.
So this software helps essentially eliminate that issue. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Anyone near Tel Aviv could hear the entire city rocking out as Aerosmith walked this way and kicked off its major world tour in Israel. Lead singer Steven Tyler totally charmed the enthusiastic crowd of 50,000 Israeli fans. He even sprinkled quite a bit of Hebrew in between his best hits, starting with a greeting of Erev Tov for good evening. The bad boys from Boston repertoire included Living on the Edge, Crazy, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, and Dream On. He even gave a shout out to Israel's most famous supermodel, who was apparently sitting in the VIP section, by calling out, "Barafeli, this song is for you, baby." The 69-year-old veteran rocker didn't let any minor microphone issues slow him down, and he even sang out that he intends to make Aliyah and immigrate to Israel. While bandmate Joe Perry gave a guitar solo, video played of him strumming in the nearby Rabin Square. The lead guitarist told the agreeable audience that 23 years is much too long, since the last time the 70s rock stars performed in the Jewish state. Then Tyler called out Laila Tov, good night, and wished one and all good luck with a hearty Mazal Tov before concluding the unforgettable show.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Last night, 50,000 Israeli fans gathered in Tel Aviv's Park Yarkon to watch the legendary Aerosmith perform, which is quite a gathering. So today's word is kahal, which means crowd in Hebrew. There's nothing like a good kahal to start a party, and given that Israel is such a small country, it's hard not to come across a kahal. Not all crowds in Israel are a result of massive demonstrations or shows, though. You may end up in the middle of a kahal at the supermarket in Tel Aviv or in the bank, because Israelis struggle to understand the basic concept of waiting in lines. Now, in life, it's easy to follow the kahal, but remember this, it takes courage to stand alone. So don't be scared of standing out of the crowd. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a low of 69 or 21 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow is expected to be partly cloudy with a chance of light rain and a high of 79 or 26 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.61 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.